Alright guys, here's another off the computer video log of another car I built. Anyway, that coral and gray 4-door 55 Bel Air there, I actually got that off eBay and it was only about 15 miles from my house. But anyway, I did a little bit of maintenance stuff to it and I started using it as a daily driver. It was pretty much all I had at the time. Then I found the red and white two-door hardtop there. I found that in South Coffeyville, Oklahoma, and bought it and brought it home. It didn't have a motor and transmission. It did have a title, and it did have a front clip. The other quarter panel was primered, and they had done a pretty horrible overlap patch job of partial quarter back there. So anyway, I decided, because I couldn't afford to build the red and white one, so I sold the coral and gray one on eBay and used the money on the hardtop there. So this is pretty much what I did to it to use it for a daily. I sanded it all down and I put, this is just black urethane primer on it. I did put some lowering blocks in the back. I did drop spindles, disc brake kit in the front. The 18-inch wheels, I think they were 18 by 8s and 18 by 9s. They actually come off a guy's S10 pickup that he had lowered, and I purchased them and put them on my car. I had a little small dome piston 355 in it. Anyway, I just pretty much threw a blanket over the original bench seat in the front and drove it. I drove it, I think, about a year in this condition. It was very dependable. I drove it everywhere. I even drove it to the drag strip, the midnight drags, and I actually raced it quite a bit. It had 100 shot of nitrous on it. So anyway, if you've been paying attention to the dates on the pictures there, I actually tore the car all apart. I had a mobile sandblast guy come out and blast the frame, pretty much everything except the exterior part of the body. I did have him do all the inside of the car, inside of the trunk area and everything. But I didn't have him do, because he was just using regular like kiln dried sand, so I didn't have him do the outside of the body. I didn't want it warped. But anyway, the date on that, if I can read that without my readers, is 7/1/2008. I was a member of the local guys. He had his own website and he rented the drag strip, and it was like 28 days or something, 27 days from the date on that picture. And anyway, it was kind of a bet type of thing, but I made it to the drag strip and raced that car in like 27 days from this picture, when this picture was taken. I'd planned on painting the body of the car, which if I'd have painted it, I wouldn't have made it to the drag strip for sure, because I'd had to color sand and buff and all that stuff. But anyway, that quarter panel was so bad I couldn't repair it and it needed a new one. And I pretty much already spent my budget on other restoration parts and pretty stuff. So I ended up, working that quarter panel out the best I could, and pretty much just put it back in primer again. And I did a few upgrades to the engine. As you can see from the chassis there, I welded some plates in and patched a few bigger holes. That was some bolt-in motor mounts. I actually put a weld around the mounts, but I left the bolt holes. But anyway, that's about all the smoothing I'd done on that frame there. This is it after I shot it. It looked pretty nice. That's actually, you'll have to kind of look at it there. That is actually a stencil of, like a skull stencil I got at my local paint shop, just to give it a little detail on it there. But the chassis, I blasted and painted it, and cleaned it all up real good. It was a factory 55 rear end. It was actually the original one out of the car. It was a 410 or 411 factory gear, but it was a single track. This is it as it's going together. I'm a real big detail guy. I like my bolts to be fresh and clean, and every piece has to be painted. It just makes a really nice end result. But, I got it back as a roller, and let's see the date on the pic there. This is my engine. I had a gallon of paint mixed, and that was the color I was going to put on the forward part of the car. It was a Pontiac GTO Brazen Pearl, like 2000 something Pontiac GTO. But in this picture, that's a Dart intake and a Dart Iron Eagle heads. That was my upgrades I did to the engine. Man, I tell you what, that car would move after that. It's a short tail turbo 350 I had in it. It's not a B&M tranny, but I had a Transpac in it and a B&M stall. And that's it after I painted it and detailed it. I did this is bed liner on the floor. I've got it on the rotisserie outside. Sprayed all underneath the car. That actually turned out pretty slick. This is the engine with all the goodies bolted on it. I had a lot of billet stuff on there. It's what I actually spent a lot of my money on, was that billet crap. But it sure did look nice. This is it going back together, as you can see by the date on the picture. I mean, I was rocking and rolling on that car. I did smooth the firewall. Done a real big smooth job on it. It looked really, really slick. I went with a two-tone primer. I did the buff in the front and the black on the back because I drove it in all black for so long I was tired of it. But I had all the windows out, the doors off, I mean everything. It was pretty much stripped apart, as you've seen from the other pictures. But you know, I had a lot of guys that were so negative about it, like, oh, there's no way you're going to make it and all this stuff, and I made it. More pictures of it going together there, getting all the trim put on, and I actually polished the trim here on my buffing wheel and stuff. But now I didn't have much of a headliner for that drag race, but you don't really need an interior for racing. This was really late at night. I think this might have been way past midnight taking these pictures. But there's the car going back together, and pay attention to the date there. Alright, and there I am running down the road headed toward the drag strip. Tulsa Raceway Park is it's about 15 minutes from my house. My wife took this picture out the windshield of her 71 Chevelle. It was an SS clone car I built for her with a big block. Anyway, I bolted a Race Series Holly, a double pumper on the car, brand new from Summit, and pretty much off I went, basically, headed for the drag strip. I never got on it or anything, I just pretty much drove it. Never got into the secondaries on it. This is once we got to the drag strip. I was having trouble getting them slicks on there. It was brand new slicks, and we ended up letting all the air out of the tire and pretty much just like wadding the tire up, squishing it to get it stuffed up underneath there. But we did get them on. The guy in the background in the orange shirt is my Uncle Wayne. He's no longer with us, but he was a big influence on me when I was younger as a 55 guy. He had, when I was a kid, he had a gold Tudor hardtop 55 with a 427 big block and a 4-speed. And he was a big street racer. He actually had several 55s. This is me after getting teched in and getting up there to the line. It was a buy run. But anyway, the car was pretty much untested for a full pass. I got on the button right off the line. As soon as that last yellow hit, I nailed everything, and I cut a 960 foot with a single track gear, or single track rear, which is pretty good. But I had an issue. I got a little over half track. Car it fell on its face and it started fluttering and shaking. I let off the nitrous button, and I actually let off the gas, and it was still fluttering and shaking, and I got back on the button and the gas, and it just wasn't doing anything, wasn't responding. And as I went to turn down there at the end of the traps, it died. I like to never got the car back started, but I finally did get it started, and I revved the crap out of it. And as I got back to my pits, it died on me again. That's my wife and her Chevelle. But anyway, this is no joke. When I pulled the spark plug, first plug out of that engine, the gas dripped off of it. I basically flooded that engine running the nitrous, and I popped the bowl off the front of the Holly, and I can't remember the jet size, but I was shocked because it was like 80s something in the primaries, which is way too much for I just had an HEI ignition with a high output coil on it. I didn't even have an MSD ignition system in it. But anyway, I sent a guy to the store and got me another set of plugs, and I started changing them out. But I got to the number 3 or 5, and it was actually lean. So I was kind of scared that my intake manifold was leaking, so I never made another pass. I didn't want to blow my engine up. Ended up, I drove my buddy's Malibu home, and we put the 55 on his trailer, and he took it home for me. But anyway, that car was pretty impressive. It was a big upgrade, because I just had old GM heads on it, like I think a 650 Holly vacuum secondary on it before, and then this go around I put the dart heads, dart intake, and an HP series Holly in. That was night and day difference right there. That thing would run, man. I know that car would ran an 11-second pass. My time slip, it went 8:04 at 88 in the 8th, and like I said, I cut a 1960 foot. But I went from rotisserie to drag strip in 27 or 28 days with tons of people telling me there's no way you're going to make it. And I made it. Now, you know, if I'd have painted the car, I wouldn't have made it. And it didn't have a stitch of interior in it. I just had a seat in it, and that was it. Now, this is it after getting it back home and changing the intake gasket and putting another set of plugs in it and rejetting the carb and doing a final tune on it. I got my wheels back on the back. But I don't think I even had any bumpers for this car. But anyway, there's how I raced it. It was just no door panels, no headliner, no carpet, just one seat, and that was pretty much it for the drag race. But anyway, ended up having an issue. We was getting ready to go back to the midnight drags, and I was messing with it in the garage, and I was winging the throttle, and it started knocking. And at that point, I'd got pretty mad and went straight in there and put it on eBay. Car ended up going to, man, I can't remember. I want to say Michigan or something, somewhere up north. Anyway, the guy ended up calling me like 2 weeks later and told me he found the knock. It was the fluid damper balancer I put on the car. It sheared the Woodruff key, and it was causing it to knock. It sounded just like a bottom end knock too, because I just knew, I'd messed up a wrist pin or something in that engine, but anyway, I sold it on eBay, and it went to a new home up north, and I don't know whatever happened to it after that. I don't know if it ever got painted and finished or what the heck happened, but anyway, that was my first hardtop, and it was a pretty neat car.